Greetings and welcome back to Adventures with Dice. I'm Rob, your host on this channel, and today we're going to be starting a video series on Icrpg, Index Card RPG, and the campaign that I'm about to run with it with some friends of mine. Now, we are running this every other Saturday night, and we are doing two back-to-back Saturdays because this past Saturday nobody had anything to do. So we got together and kind of did a session 0 character creation, but it'll start this coming Saturday. So you can look forward to Mondays and Tuesdays being the review that I'm going to put up of what they did during the previous Saturday game. And I'll probably be using a wider angle to show you the terrain setup and everything. Very, very similar to what Runehammer does with his room design, but I'm going to be showing you each room as I designed it for the adventure and how they went through it. So there's three key concepts that I want to cover today in our session 0 that are going to be important moving forward. And then I'll put all these in a playlist so you guys can, check them out at your leisure. Let them play while you're painting, whatever. The three key concepts that we're going to look at today are: what tools am I using to run this? Who are our players and characters? And what is the backstory for the campaign and character ties? So I'm going to start off with talking about the tools that I'm using to run this, because I've seen where it can be a little confusing for some people out there as far as what version of Icrpg to grab, because you have the original packets that Runehammer put out, you have the second edition core book, and then you have the master edition, which was actually printed by Modifius. And while this edition is amazing and I do love it and it is what I use as my primary rule source, the biggest downfall, in my opinion, with this, and this is not Runehammer's fault, this is Modifius, because they control how the reprints are done. They continuously let this thing run out, and it's a while before they do another print run. So it can be a little hard to get your hands on. I think you can get it on DriveThruRPG. I do order books from DriveThruRPG from time to time, but to me, it has to be kind of a substantial order because their shipping is ridiculous, in my opinion. Especially, and it takes them a really long time if you don't pay for the upgraded shipping. They kind of move you to the back of the line, is been my experience. I mean, it took like 3 months to get one book out of them, just because I didn't pay for upgraded shipping. The easier copy to get your hands on is the second edition, the core rulebook, and this is the paperback version. I think you can get it for like $35 on Amazon or something. But, and I could be wrong. I believe the PDFs are only like $16 or something. So that's not terrible. I was gifted this. This is early Christmas, real early. But my friend Haley got me this, and she knows that if I'm into something, that if she wants to get me something related to it, she better do it quick, because if I find a way, I'm going to get it. So I appreciate that, and this is really good. So why do I have the core, second edition? Because there are differences between the two. They are essentially the same system. And if you haven't read Index Card RPG, I highly recommend, if you're a game master, you do so, because it is a system, so you can take it and just play it as is, but everything pretty much in the system is plug and play, so you can take bits and pieces out of it and use in your 5e game, your OSR games, whatever. I've actually done that. I used the timer this past Tuesday night. I used timers in my Dark Places and Demogorgons game because they were fighting a guy who had turned into a giant snake because he was a cultist, and they're crazy. So anyway, but I used a timer to count down the basement they were in was on fire, and that's how I let them put the pressure on, so they knew they had X amount of rounds to do what they had to do and get out. I've used the movement and range system, which I really like, because I even though I've used maps and minis for a very long time, I've always hated the counting squares, and then some games want you to count diagonally as 2 squares, and this, that, and the other. I've always hated that, because though I use maps, I'm also heavily into crafting. I don't do a lot of crafting videos on here. I do post a bunch of my craft stuff on my Patreon, which is in the links if you'd like to help support the channel and get yourself some cool exclusive stuff. Check out the Patreon page. I post a lot of stuff on there about crafts that I work on. The reason that I don't do a lot of crafting videos, honestly, is for whatever reason, they don't get a lot of views on my channel. I know, you know, DM Scotty and Black Magic Craft and even Runehammer and others have done tons of these crafting videos, and they get lots and lots of views, and I watch them. I get tons of ideas, especially from DM Scotty. He's just got amazing stuff that he does with garbage, and you can just build cool terrain with it. But for me, I've done a couple of crafting videos, you know, trash terrain type stuff, and I've done a couple of painting videos, but they just really don't get a lot of views. I don't know if people, maybe a lot of people just don't come to my channel for that, but they get views over time, but it takes a really long time for them. So I think that my primary audience doesn't really come on here looking for those kinds of videos. So I just don't push that stuff on my channel. I'll show you pictures of stuff I did or talk about it, but I just don't do a lot of crafting videos on here. But that being said, I love to craft. I love to build 3D terrain. And one thing I hate with 3D terrain is when people, you know, have to grid it out to be able to count your squares and move your miniatures around and stuff like that. I hate that on flat maps. I hate it on 3D terrain. I don't like the way it looks. I think it breaks up the aesthetic. And it slows the game down tremendously. Miniature gameplay can already slow your game down some. It's kind of a trade-off, because it can be a great visual aid, but it can also slow combat way down. And then when you add in the constant counting squares to figure out where everything is and line of sight, it just adds a whole nother layer of complexity that I don't like. So one of the things I found very early on, Hankrin sent me the PDF to Master Edition, and I went through it. Mainly, I wanted to review the book, but I also wanted the loot tables, because I had heard from everybody how amazing these tables were. So initially, that was what I was after, was the loot tables. And don't get me wrong, they're fantastic. But some of you know I hurt my back this year, and I had a lot of downtime. And one day I just got up in the middle of the night. I think it was like 3 or 4 in the morning. Couldn't sleep because of the pain. So I sat down and I was just, you know, on a heating pad, taking medicine. And I started reading the book on PDF. And I fell in love with it. This is a fantastic game on its own. Yes, you can take it and plug and play the really cool stuff out of here into other games. And I highly suggest that if you're a dungeon master, game master, referee, whatever you want to call yourself, if you're running games, get a copy of this. Even if it's just in PDF, get a copy of this, read it, because the game theory that he uses for this game is amazing. His ideas behind room design and the timers, the treats, the threats, and everything is just so amazing. It really changed the way that I think about planning sessions and about running games. So I started using the movement system out of here, which doesn't require a grid. I don't use the banana thing, and if you've watched videos on Icrpg, you know about the banana thing. But he has the range bands of close, near, far, and out of range. And that, though it seemed a little weird when I tried to explain it to my players, once we started using it, they loved it. And I use it in any game I'm playing now that requires, I use miniatures with. There are some games I don't use miniatures with, but most of my fantasy battles and stuff, I use miniatures, and they are loving it. I'm using it with Basic Fantasy. I've used it with White Box. They really, really love how the movement's a little bit abstract. You're giving up a little bit of detail for speed of play, and it tremendously speeds up combat. And it allows me to use all this 3D terrain that I like to craft without having to put grids on it for counting stuff. Now, if you like counting grids and you like combat like that, nothing wrong with it. I'm just talking about my personal preference on this. But tons and tons of stuff in this book are fantastic. So why get a copy of 2nd edition Core? Because I found out after getting Master Edition that there are things in Core that did not get moved over to Master Edition when he cut the deal with Modifius to start producing this. So I had to get a copy of this. There are the weapon tags are explained a little better in this. What really sold me on it is there's tons of adventure seeds. There's a whole bunch of adventures in the back of it. And I was like, I got to get that because I want all that extra stuff. And I like the character progression, milestone progression, which is not milestone from D&D. It's different in this. But I like the way the character layout is, especially for Alfheim and Warp Shell, the sci-fi setting that's in here. Better than I like the setup in here. However, it's easy to translate between the two. So there's tons of inspiration to pull from out of this book. There's certain things are mapped or explained a little differently. And then, like I said, I loved getting my hands on the adventures. There's even a Call of Cthulhu style adventure in here. And I was like, yep, sold. I got to have that. So I treat this as a supplement. Like, this is my main rules. And this is a supplement that I use, even though it's core rules. And you can get this and play out of it just fine. I just like the layout and design of this one a little better for my main book. But even if I didn't have Master Edition, this one is always readily in print. And if you want to get a print copy, I suggest picking it up. It's really good. 99.9% of all the stuff that's in here is in here. Now, you do have some extra settings in here that are not in this. But its two primary settings, Alfheim, which is the fantasy setting, and Warp Shell, which is the sci-fi setting, are both in here, along with a bunch of adventures and how to, structure and do your own settings. But it's just a really, really both of them are fantastic books. I do go to Master Edition as my core rules, and again, I treat Core 2nd Edition as a supplement book that I use. So those are the two books that I use, or I'm going to be using mainly. And one of the things that you'll find about Index Card RPG is hankering over at Runehammer is very, very heavy into the do-it-yourself, build your own kind of stuff, which sounds like lazy writing on the surface, but when you look into it, it's very well thought out. A lot of this is just... It culminated from house rules that he used to try to make his 5th Ed game better and faster and so on and so forth. And it just turned into its own game eventually. And it's fantastic. It's really fun to use. It's fun to design rooms for combats. It's fun to design, there's a bunch of cool monsters in here. But then there's a whole monster generation process you can go through. And you can do, I need giant spiders. How would I make giant spiders? And you go through and you make giant spiders. But you can also hey, I drew this really weird creature-looking monster, or I've got these cool minis for these monsters, but they don't have stats. You can use this to, either one of the books, really, but Master Edition especially, to go through and make your own creatures, give them the abilities you want to give them. And it's fun. It's fun to do. I've had a blast with it. So those are my two core books that I'm using. My next book that I'll have on the table quite a bit is this notebook, which is not my GM notebook, mind you. I keep the character sheets in here, things like that. But this, I printed out the loot tables And I printed them all out and I put them in here just because I have, you know, old man eyes. It's easier to see the bigger table than in the small book because I will be using these loop tables a lot. I've also printed out some stuff from Look to Your Left, and which is a great little zine that is related to Index Card RPG. So you should check that out as well. I also keep in here the spell list, which is just a front and back one-page spell list for wisdom spells and intelligence spells. I don't need these. I can find them in the book if I need them real easy, but I throw them out on the table because my players then have access to it without having to write down what the spells do. Granted, each spell is pretty much just a line of description, but it makes it easier for them to have it, especially since I have one mage and one priest. So I have one of each spell sheet out there. I also printed out and made a copy of the Alfheim map, and it's out on the table so the characters can kind of get a feel for where things are and stuff like that. The other book that I'm using, and I'm going to do more information on this as time goes on, my GM's notebook. This is an important book. Runehammer talks about this all the time on his channel. I've talked about it multiple times in multiple videos for multiple games. Your GM notebook is vitally important. It's where you're going to be living. It's where you're going to be building your world, your adventure, everything, and it's all going to be in here. So I just got a hardback sketch pad basically, and I started putting printouts and stuff I wrote in here as key rules and things that I wanted in the game, blunder tables. I've also created monsters that are in here. I don't have a Mind Flayer. I have a Mind Slayer, which you can get on my Patreon if you would like. And the next page comes with the stats and everything for it. And then, of course, I have my first adventure in here. And next week when I do the video and I show you the rooms, I'm going to show you, in detail how I did it in here first and then built everything out with terrain and show you how it plays out. But those are the 3 books that I'm using. Is really just the core rules, Master Edition, and my GM's notebook. And I love the create your own stuff aspect of this game because I'm artsy-fartsy, craftsy, whatever. And I like to build stuff, not just terrain, but I do a lot of cards. And I understand you could probably do cards, if you're good at digital stuff or, Photoshop or whatever. And that's fantastic. I like to do stuff by hand. And I don't know, it just has a certain look to it that I really dig. One of the things that you use in Index Card RPG is hero coins. And I took and made some coins, and I wasn't super happy with them, so I ended up making cards for my hero coins that I'll pass out to the players. Each one has kind of a different wizard lock design on it. But I enjoy doing stuff like that, so I made these to hand out to my players during the game. And one of the other things I made is, he likes to use a big D20, a lot of people do, with this game to show the room target number. I didn't have a big D20, and I didn't want to buy a big D20 just for using with this. Also, I had the opportunity to make something, so as usual I did. And I made target room cards. They're fairly big. They sit out on the table. You have the room's target number, hard and easy modifiers, which is +3, -3. And I did 10 through 20. 20 would be super epic. That's like campaign living or campaign ending powerful monster you're fighting. So the 20 is rarely ever going to hit the table. But I did, and each one has a little, slightly different design to the way it is. And you can do stuff like that, or you can buy a big D20 and put it on the table. Either way, I'm just showing you the tools that I'm using to do this game. So, that is, the other thing I'm using is miniatures, obviously. I am using my terrain. This is my new terrain board I just did for outdoor encounters. I've done videos on my Ultimate Dungeon board. I'm also going to be using like the the cutout stand-up minis for stuff that I don't have miniatures for. And I think that's pretty much it. Other than that, I just need players. And so let's talk about players and characters for a minute. Now I have 4 players for this game. And one of them, my friend Jay, was sick Saturday night. He had a real bad stomach virus, so he couldn't come over. So he's going to come over, I think, Tuesday a little early, and we're going to get his character made. But I do know already what he's going to play, because he said he wanted to play a Dwarf Warrior. So I've gone ahead and picked out a miniature. We'll use this guy unless he comes up with a different type. I've got tons of dwarves armed all different ways. So however he wants to do it, we'll have a dwarf miniature for him. These 3 miniatures I'm going to have to paint, and I'll do that before Saturday when we play. But my friend Jimmy, who's a buddy of mine from church, is coming over, and he is playing. He's playing a elf shadow. So I'm going to use this guy right here and paint him up. And he's playing an elf shadow named Balin. And Haley is playing a human priest named Delphi. So we're going to use this miniature right here for her. Maybe I'll get some. I'll definitely do some close-up shots, especially once everything's painted. And then Tina is playing a human mage named Jules. So, and she's definitely into the fire stuff. So I will get those other 3 painted so that when I do the close-up videos or close-up shots after the game, they'll look a lot better. Each of them made their characters. Now, like I said, Jason still has to come make his character. But we got Jimmy playing an elf, and the elves have invaded Scar, and there's now a border war brewing between Scar and Gray. Our characters are actually starting the game below Gray in the Greenway in a village I call Oakvale. And they each did a really good job of tying their backstories together and into the ongoing campaign that's in the book. Alfheim has a pretty neat history in the book, and like his other settings, like Warp Shell, it starts out with the 6 things that everybody knows, and you use that kind of basic information to give your character some backstory. So, Jimmy's character was an elf, and the elves are invading and hunting humans to extinction, and he was kind of a forward spy type character, and he had been sent in on behind enemy lines on an assassination mission in the capital at Gray, which is where Tina's character was. Her character Delphi was there. I'm sorry, her character Jules was there learning under her master, a master mage in the city. And Jimmy's character actually killed her master, and the guards got him and nearly beat him to death. And it wasn't until Delphi showed up, who's the priest or priestess, and she is from an order called the Order of the White Flame. They're very culty type religious order who is very anti-magic. And she realized early on, even though they kind of held her for a while, how evil they really were. So she has escaped them, and she made it down to Gray. And that's where her and Tina's character kind of hooked up. Her, Delphi and Jules hooked up there and became friends. And they ended up showing compassion to Balin, the elf who had slain Jules' master. And once they healed him, he was like, okay, well, wait a minute, these humans aren't as evil as we've been told. And he's kind of playing it like the elves are victims of propaganda. So he has flipped sides and decided to help the humans. And the 3 of them have all migrated down into the Greenway and found this village called Oakvale, where they have been living for the last few months. And that's where our adventure, the first adventure, which I have titled The Horn Beast of the Black Ruins. That is where it will start. And then they're going to get a definite taste of a different style of game mastering from me, just because well, I mean, it's not the normal way I do it, but I'll discuss more of that in the next video as I'm showing you how I design the rooms and why I designed things the way I did and the inspiration and the ideas that I took from Icrpg. But this has just kind of been a recap of our session 0 to let you know who's playing what character and what stuff I'm using to run the game. Not a super exciting video, I don't think, but if you want to watch the whole story as it unfolds every 2 weeks, and I put a video up for it, and that should be next Monday, the first one, or the second video technically goes up, session 1. When that goes up, I'm going to have them in a playlist, so if you start here, you'll know who everybody is and be able to follow the story all the way through. So, apologize for the stuff. I've got a little bit of a cold. But anyway, that's where we're at. I am looking super forward to playing that this Saturday night. Very excited to get into this game and see if they can survive what I've put together. Maybe. Hope so. I want them to win, but I want them to win at a cost. So that's all I've got for right now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.